Hey everybody, welcome back and thanks for watching 4 Low Rocks. Let's go inside the 4 Low Rocks garage and add some candle power to our JLUR. Ah, those pesky spiders. I guess I have to do something about that one day. California, you know, living out here is not the same. Hey, so today we're bringing you some candle power on the front of our JLUR. Having installed the 4-way Mopar switches recently, it's time now to make use of those switches and to get a little bit of trail lighting out here. You know, I'm not at all unhappy with the LED lighting that came with the Jeep, but I think it's time to broaden our light swath out on the path and light up the night when we go on evening runs. We do have a Halloween run coming up very soon, and on that run I intend to use these lights to their fullest extent. So what I did is kind of the opposite way that I've done everything so far on this Jeep, is I went real cheap, okay? And I know that oftentimes it's said that you get what you pay for, and maybe I did here, maybe I didn't, but we'll check these out because these nightlight units that I got off of Amazon had some really great reviews. So I've got 2 little cube lights. They're actually a little bit bigger than your typical 3-inch cube light. These are about 4 inches, and they've got 6 LEDs per side. These are not spotlights. These are broad beam pattern. I got all of them to be broad beam pattern because I don't really think that I need something that goes deep down the trail, but something that just broadens my scope of what I can see. I also got this nightlight 20-inch bar that I intend to put on the front of the bumper. It's a very nice unit. It's sturdy and thick. The nightlight bar has a combination of spot beams on either side and broad beams in the center. So this ought to work quite well to brighten my way down the path from the front of the bumper. What I was not expecting was I got this warn light as part of a combo deal when I purchased the winch. I filled out the rebate form for it and mailed it off sometime after I installed the winch. It took a while for it to show up, but it's here now. It's a 10-inch. It is a broad floodlight. I like the fact that it's black on the interior. It's got the little Warn logos on the side and inside where the LEDs are. I'm not sure that I'm going to use it. I might try both the 20-inch bar and this 10-inch light bar on the bull bar that I have down front. Maybe I'll put both of them on that bull bar, one on top, one on bottom. We'll see how things work out. So let's get to it. So if you remember, my philosophy on anything you do electrical is always to isolate the battery from the rest of the car. So first it's one 13mm and 2 10mm bolts that take these ground isolators off of the side of the Jeep. And then the isolator for the electrical switches. We want to make sure we remove that because we do have a hot going to those switches. Then we'll also remove the battery ground. This is just loosen up the clamp a bit. Don't have to take that all the way off. And again, we'll use a couple shop towels to isolate these things so that they don't arc and spark or make an accidental connection. So we're going to start with the little nightlight tube lights on the cowling of the Jeep. And the nightlight kit comes with these nice little brackets that have a little swing space so you can change the angle, the focus of the lens. All the nuts and bolts needed to attach the lights to these mounting plates. And I also purchased these little mounting pucks that are going to go inside the holes in the cowling where I'll mount the lights. First thing is to build up these brackets into place where they're going to go and then connect the lights to the brackets. So we're going to mount these nightlight units to the rearmost bolt in the cowling. And this is a Torx 40 to remove this bolt. And then we're going to place one of these pucks down into the hole along with a washer, and then we'll use the bolt that came with the pucks along with the nightlight mount is a 10mm bolt. We'll go ahead and get that started and tighten down. You know, it's often been said that you can disassemble a Jeep with a 10mm. I thought maybe that only applied to the JK. Once we have the bracket in place, we'll go ahead and snug it down. Might take some fine tuning later on to get the angle pointed where you really want it. But I'm just going to do a rough tightening right now. And once we have the bracket in place, we'll do the same for the other side. And connecting these cube lights to the bracket is a little bit of exercise and planning and figuring out how you're going to do it, because you have to mount these 4 little 10mm bolts and washers into either side of the bracket, which then fixes the light in position. This forward one here, right underneath this cable, is a little bit difficult to get to. I had to use a small little 10mm wrench instead of a socket to get to that one, and I could only turn it barely 1/8 of a turn at a time. And as always, once you get one side complete, it's time to go do it on the other side. And here's what they look like installed on the cowling of the Jeep. We still have to wire them up, but we'll do that after we get the light bar mounted on the bull bar. Now, to fasten the light bar onto the bull bar, we've purchased these very nice little mounts that are flexible in many separate axes of rotation. They'll fit over the light bar, and then we'll maneuver this top plate to fit best with the light. So these take 5mm hex drivers and 6mm for the larger. We'll go ahead and disassemble it first to get it over the bull bar. These brackets work rather well. They are flexible enough to open them up and get them over the bull bar, but then when you're open wide, they're just barely enough to fit into the nut on the bottom. You can see that's a self-locking nut on the bottom. And so you got to be careful how much you bend them open so that you don't have to squeeze them back together very tightly. So now we'll go ahead and we'll add the light bracket to the front of it, and we'll just loosely place everything where it needs to be so that we can add the light bar once we get the other bracket installed on the other end of the bull bar. One thing I kind of like about this setup is that this bracket that comes out of the front of the bull bar is going to bring this light bar out enough so that it shouldn't interfere too much with the airflow going to the cooling system in the jail. So in the same manner that we use these little brackets for the night lights up on the cowl, we'll go ahead and mount those to these forward brackets on the bull bar. And this takes a 14mm socket and wrench. The good thing about it is on the top side of this bracket there are little tabs that hold the bolt in place, almost as if it was a self-locking mechanism. And we'll go ahead and clamp that down a bit right now, tighten it up better later on. And by the way, yes, I do use blue Loctite in my final assembly. Right now I'm just showing you the mock-up. I can't find my little tube of blue Loctite right now, but I'll go ahead and make sure I do that before I hit the trail with this setup. Now we can go ahead and mock up the fitment a little bit, and I got that pretty darn close. Just move it over a bit, get it so it lines up, and that looks like it's going to fit to some extent. And we'll start putting in the small little 10mm bolts, just like we did for the ones up on the cowl. So it's important to check and recheck your positioning to make sure that you like the final outcome. A little bit low on this side, so I'm going to go ahead and loosen it up a bit and lift it just slightly. Tighten it back down. Just snug. Take another look. A little bit more, I think. And back down again. And I think roughly that's pretty good. Now we need to go in and tighten these small little 10mm bolts. Just make sure it all fits well there too. You know, with so many bolts holding this assembly together, there are so many degrees of freedom and adjustability that I don't think I'll ever really get to where I'm finally finished or like the final product. But now it's these 6mm hex bolts that we have to get to, but the bolt that holds the unit onto the bracket is in the way, so we're going to have to use a traditional hex wrench. And there's the front nylite bar, completely mounted on the front of the Jeep, ready to be wired into the Mopar auxiliary switches. So let's wire these lights together. We've got some lengths of cable in both red and black, so we can kind of keep with the same continuing color scheme. And we've also got some crimper tools and some shrink wrap butt connectors. So you can see here we've taken our red and black theme and carried it right along with our new cabling. We've put a couple crimp and heat shrink connectors onto there, and we're going to go ahead and apply a little bit of heat to get them all nice and sealed up. Now, to make sure we've got it well and insulated, you can see that I've put another layer of heat wrap or heat shrink over each of the connections, and we'll go ahead and shrink those down now. There we go. That should keep the weather out of those cables pretty well. So you can see now we've made our connections, and we started to stuff the cable inside a wire loom. Now we're going to follow down underneath the grill area of the Jeep along roughly the same path that we used to run the line for the winch. Here's a detailed look at how the final wiring paths look prior to making all the final connections. The front light bar follows the same path under the grill as the worn winch and meets up with the battery and ground in the engine compartment. The two cube lights follow a water management channel into the engine compartment where both the hot and the grounds are mated together before making the final connections. There is still some tidying up to do with wire looms and better grounds, but this hookup will suffice for testing. So now that we've connected and run the vast majority of the wires, it's time to start setting them up, and we'll start connecting the grounds at first. Remember, there's two 10 millimeters and a 13 millimeter here. And then we'll go ahead and replace the battery cable back onto its battery stud here, and use a 10 millimeter to tighten that back up. And there you have it, folks, all lit up and ready for the trail. And those look pretty darn bright. So that wraps up the installation of our off-road lighting. I think it came out really nice. I really like the way it looks. It's nice and bright. I can see it reflecting on the house across the street quite well, and it's not even dark yet. We'll take it out on the trail a little bit later on and do a test between just the regular lights on the Wrangler along with our off-road lights, and we'll test them individually as well to see how well they do out on the trail. Here's an overhead view of the light bar and the cube lights being lit in conjunction with the Jeep's head and fog lights. All in all, this setup puts out an impressive amount of light. I'll do a more thorough review on the trail from the driver's perspective. Note that I didn't use the worn light bar, and I'll save that for another project later on down the road. Thanks for joining me. Please subscribe to the 4 Low Rocks channel. It'll be right up here and right down there. 2 places that you can click that button. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter as well. We'll see you out on the trail, and until then, happy wheeling.